On the 5th of April, 1581, a leaden sky draped London in gloom, as though the heavens themselves shuddered at the horror about to unfold. In Smithfield, where the clamor of cattle markets and fairs typically filled the air, a restless crowd gathered, drawn by a spectacle as rare as it was dreadful. At the heart of the square stood a massive bronze cauldron, perched atop a roaring fire, its flames licking hungrily as the water within began to seethe. A ripple of unease swept through the onlookers as guards dragged forth a bound man, his face ashen, his eyes wide with unspoken terror. His name was Richard Rose, a humble cook in the service of Bishop John Fisher. In mere moments, he would face a death of unimaginable cruelty, to be plunged alive into boiling water, his flesh dissolving inch by agonizing inch. How had a lowly servant come to such a ghastly fate? To unravel this grim tale, we must wind back the clock to a turbulent England, torn by power struggles and religious fervor. In February of that year, the kingdom was a cauldron of unrest. King Henry VIII, resolute in his quest to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon and wed Anne Boleyn, had fractured the nation. On one side stood ambitious courtiers, eager to back the king's desires. On the other, staunch clerics who held marriage as sacred and unbreakable. Among these was John Fisher, Bishop of Rochester, a man of unwavering faith, who stood as a bulwark against the royal divorce. His steadfast convictions earned him the enmity of Henry and the Boleyns, who saw him as a barrier to their ambitions. Fisher lived in constant dread of treachery. Taking extraordinary measures to protect himself, he slept in different chambers each night and scrutinized every morsel he ate or drank, fearing poison. His vigilance, as events would prove, was not misplaced. At Lambeth, the bishop's residence south of London, Fisher employed a modest staff, including Richard Rose, his cook. Rose was an unremarkable man, middle-aged, blending seamlessly into the throng of servants who kept grand households running. Quiet and diligent, he had never given cause for suspicion until that fateful day, the 18th of February. That afternoon, Fisher hosted a dinner for guests with a hearty soup, a staple of the era, on the menu. Rose prepared the broth as usual, but secretly stirred in a mysterious powder. Later, he would swear it was meant as a cruel jest, believing the substance to be a mere purgative that would cause discomfort, not death. Fisher, by chance or instinct, barely touched the soup. Others at the table were less sparing, and, as was customary, the leftovers were given to beggars at the gates. Among them were Bonnet, Quen, and Alice Trippitt, two destitute souls who marveled at their fortune to receive warm food from a bishop's kitchen. Hours later, horror descended. Those who had eaten the soup were seized by excruciating pain, racked by vomiting, cold sweats, and convulsions. Fisher, having consumed little, escaped the worst. Others fell gravely ill. Bonnet and Alice, who had eagerly devoured their portions, were not so fortunate. Their bodies, found the next day, bore the marks of a torturous death. Word of the poisoning spread like wildfire, and when news reached Henry VIII, his rage was incandescent. Though Fisher was his political foe, such an act threatened the very foundation of the monarchy. If a bishop could be poisoned, who could guarantee the king's safety? He demanded an immediate investigation. Richard Rose was swiftly apprehended as he tried to flee London. Dragged to the Tower, he was subjected to the wheel, a torture device that stretched his limbs to the brink of tearing, each turn amplifying his agony. Under this torment, he confessed to adding the powder, but insisted he had not known its lethal nature, thinking it a harmless prank. Curiously, the case bypassed standard legal proceedings. On February 28th, Henry himself addressed Parliament an extraordinary act, denouncing the crime as high treason, not just against Fisher but against the crown, ever eager to appease their tempestuous king. Parliament passed the act for poisoning, classifying the crime as treason and prescribing a novel punishment, death by boiling. Henry did not merely condemn Rose without a fair trial. He crafted a retroactive law to ensure a spectacularly gruesome penalty. Treason already carried horrific punishments, dragged by horses, hanged, disemboweled, and quartered, but the king sought something to match the poison's insidious horror, a slow, searing death that would let the condemned feel every moment of their flesh melting away. Why such savagery? Why did Henry take such a personal interest in a case involving a mere cook and a bishop he scarcely favored? the motives remain shrouded in mystery. Some historians suggest Henry had a deep-seated fear of poisoning, viewing it as a cowardly death unfit even for his enemies. Others, more skeptical, propose political machinations. Eustace Chapeyes, the imperial ambassador and a confidant of Fisher, hinted in his letters that Henry's zeal might have been a ploy to deflect suspicion from himself, or more plausibly, from Anne Boleyn and her family. Rumors swirled that the Boleyns had hired Rose to eliminate Fisher, a formidable obstacle to their matrimonial plans. Rose's swift and theatrical execution could have served to quash any deeper inquiry that might implicate those close to the throne. Whatever the truth, Richard Rose's doom was sealed. On April 5th, Smithfield buzzed with a morbid throng. Spectators jostled for a better view, while vendors hawked food and drink, as if this were a festival rather than a man's gruesome end. When Rose was brought forth, staggering, perhaps dulled by alcohol, a faint mercy in his damnation. The cauldron was already simmering. Guards stripped him bare, and a priest muttered a hurried absolution, offering spiritual solace but no reprieve from the torment to come. What followed was among the most harrowing executions in English history. 3 times Rose was lowered into the boiling water. At the first plunge, only his legs were submerged. His screams pierced the air as his skin peeled from his flesh. Some in the crowd fainted, while others averted their eyes, unable to bear the sight. At the second plunge, the water swallowed his torso, staining the once clear liquid a sickly pink. His cries dissolved into guttural gurgles as he struggled to breathe. The third and final plunge, Rose was fully immersed. Death, at last, delivered him from his suffering. Rose's execution was not unique. The new law doomed others to the same fate. In 1542, Margaret Davy was boiled alive at Smithfield for poisoning 3 households. This barbaric practice persisted until the reign of Edward VI, Henry's son, when reforms curbed such brutal punishments. What makes Rose's case so unsettling is not merely the ferocity of his penalty, but the political currents swirling around it. It was a pawn in a volatile era, crushed by religious strife and courtly intrigue. John Fisher, the man Rose allegedly tried to kill, met his own grim end in 1535, beheaded for refusing to acknowledge Henry as head of the Church of England. Anne Boleyn, tangentially tied to the affair, faced her downfall in 1536. Executed on charges of adultery and treason, widely believed to be fabricated. Henry pressed on with his turbulent reign, marrying 4 more wives, breaking with Rome, and reshaping England as a Protestant nation, his paranoia and ruthlessness only deepening with age. Today, Smithfield is a bustling commercial hub, bearing no trace of its horrific past. Few who pass through know that centuries ago a man was boiled alive beneath their feet. Richard Rose's story offers a chilling glimpse into a time when justice and cruelty were entwined, when the powerful bent laws to their whims, and when a life's worth was measured by its political utility. Was Rose truly guilty? A scapegoat for a broader conspiracy? Or merely the victim of a tragic mistake? The truth is lost to time. But his punishment, steeped in macabre irony for a cook, defies any sense of justice, even by the brutal standards of his day. 5 centuries later, this tale reminds us how thin the line is between civilization and savagery, and how institutions meant to protect can become tools of terror in the hands of the mighty. Beneath the hurried steps of modern Londoners, the echoes of that grim April day still linger, whispering the screams of a man who learned, in the most horrific way, what it meant to be on the other side of the cauldron. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. More true tales await you.